what the difference might be between them, and whether or not either or both are applicable in your own context. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Lucy and I are both participated in the Smurfit School of Education, and we both have the Masters in Executive Coaching, and that's actually where we met, and we've worked together a couple of times on different things. And I'm going to talk about mentoring and about the role of executive coaching, one-to-one executive coaching, and Lucy's going to do that, the area around team coaching, which is trickier and is a very new and emerging area. So I think that'll be an interesting one as well. And we're going to try and save as much time as we can. I understand it's for about an hour, and we'll take the questions at the very end. And if people don't think of their question until afterwards, feel free. Lima's going to circulate the slides, and what we'll do is our contact details are on it, and feel absolutely free to contact us afterwards if a question occurs to you or there's something that you want to know. Now, everything has disappeared from the, the presentation is coming up. Great. Sure, I'll wait for that to happen, so at least I'm in line with that. I hope there's more than climate action in your...
Oh, would have a long list, I'm afraid.
Up there on the left-hand side. Top.
I think that's coming in, I think. And here we go.
And can you go to view slideshow? Yeah, great. Okay.
And is everybody can see the screen now?
Yeah, we can see it, Liam.
Great stuff.
Okay, so Lima, as I said, is going to circulate them afterwards. So don't go away, Liam, because you have to turn the slides.
Just going to break down a cup of coffee and things.
Oh, don't worry about that. We'll get it afterwards. So if you just turn over there, and we'll get straight into to our subject. So mentoring. Mentoring tends to be very long term. And in reality, early mentors tend to stay with you throughout your whole career. And it's pretty much knowledge based. And it is a sharing of experience. And I've had a number of mentors throughout my career. Some of them you will probably know. Joe Horan would have been one of them. Tom Doherty would have been another, and Ned O'Connor would have been another. And they're names that are probably familiar to all of you. But they're very invested and they do stay with you. But as I said, it is knowledge-based and it tends to be above the line. Coaching is much more short-term, and that focuses on your current role. And it's trying to really use the issues that you're experiencing in your current role to overcome some of the behaviors that may not be serving you quite as well now as they might have in the past. Because in reality, the problems that you have in your current role, you probably had them in the role before. And it may well be that, you know, if you're someone that finds decision-making pretty hard, then no matter what role you're in, you're going to be finding decision-making difficulty. And coaching can help you start to look at that. So it goes below the line and digs in a little bit deeper. But very often, it is a blended approach that works, but it does depend, and every situation is different. So we look at a little bit about mentoring. And as I said, mentoring tends to be long-term. It's a professional relationship, and it often isn't your direct line manager, but it's helpful if it is somebody within your sector or within your organization. And it is about
the slides aren't moving there just a minute.
What slide would you be on there? Are you on the first or the second?
They're all they're quite hard to see actually. They're just there in the block.
They're not there on slideshow. Yeah,
it's a sorter rather than show.
Okay, 1 second now. We'll just try and.
If you
go to view slideshow and then share.
That's it.
That's it now. Yeah, it's up now.
You see that more clearly?
Well, it's still just the editing mode.
Yeah.
Top of your screen, you have a little screen there. If you tap it above the home button.
Yeah. Go back here one. Apologies now. Are you happy to stay with that one because we know it works? I can continue to fiddle with
Yeah,
the
no,
other
stay
one.
with that.
That looks good.
We're on slide 3 now at the moment,
Yeah.
mentoring. That's what
Okay, so as I said, it is about plotting your career, and it's about the kind of professional development that you might want to get you to where you want to go. And where you want to go is different for everybody, and everybody's journey is that bit different. And it's really important to get the right mentor for your own situation. So some people might want to say, I want somebody who really helped me chart a direct line to the very top of an organization. And somebody else might be saying, I want somebody who has really cracked doing a really good job with a good work-life balance. And both of their destinations are different, and they probably need different kinds of mentors. And I think the other thing just to bear in mind is that times do change. And a mentor who charted a particular course for themselves, those courses may not be open in the same way that they were. And it's important to keep an eye on that. But no matter whether it's mentoring or coaching, the relationship always matters. It has to be somebody that you trust. It has to be someone that you hold in high regard. And it has to be someone that's relevant to you in that time. And sometimes that changes. So you may have a number of mentors that go throughout your life. And it is people who can help you understand the things that matter. But one way or the other, I think I'd also say that mentoring isn't, while we might all have mentoring conversations with staff that we really want to see the very best for, mentoring is a skill and you need to learn it. And the IEI used to run a really good program for mentors so that you're clear on what the contract is and what it isn't. So sometimes there can be expectations on one side or the other, whether it's the mentee or the mentor, and that's not actually what it's about. So I think it really is important that that kind of training is there. But for me, the kind of places that it works well is, you can be a grade 7 in a department and you do up the budget, and then the finished budget comes back and it bears absolutely no resemblance to what you did. And it really is helpful if someone can say to you, well, look, there's deals done along the way. Other departments might have needed money more than you did. And it gets crafted and they learn what the process is. So they don't have that big gulf of an experience when they become a grade 8. You have the young engineer who designs a wonderful bridge or a wonderful road, and they can't understand why the final part 8 had it all changed. Sure, wasn't their design perfect? But in reality, they didn't know anything about consultation. And it's important that they have a mentor who can explain. The finished product is not when your pen leaves the paper. It is actually when it gets into the council chamber. And as directors, you might often wonder, how did the CCMA come up with that decision? Because in your individual local authority, it may well be that the interests of the sector are not the interests for your local authority. And it is important to get to understand that, because there'll be a day when you're at the CCMA and you've got to sacrifice your needs in the greater good. I could talk here now about the libraries, but Michael Walsh once told me I had to get over it and get on with my life. But I do think that it is about trying to bridge the gulf of inexperience. And I can remember when I was a grade 6, I attended my very first area committee meeting, which would be an MD area now. And they proposed and seconded the questions that I had spent a lot of time researching and making sure I'd have all the answers for. But nobody had ever told me that all they did was propose and second them, and they just moved on. And I would have been delighted to have a mentor now who might have bridged that little gulf for me. But that happens so many times where you're in a situation that everybody takes for granted. So for me, mentoring is information-based, and it is about getting knowledge from one person to another. And the important thing is that everybody understands what the nature of that knowledge is and how that's going to be imparted. So I'm going to move on to coaching now, because coaching is much more short-term than mentoring. And the coach will not be with you for your whole life. And it really is about holding a mirror up to yourself. And you can see 2 chess pieces there. So, you're one chess piece, but the mirror might be showing you another. And I think that's the thing. The mirror actually helps. The mirror is the coach, and they help you see what you're really doing and what's really happening. And I had a brilliant coach when I was in DLR for a while. And I can remember working with her across a range of different things. And at one point, I was with her for about 3 months when she said to me, "And what are your priorities for the next 12 months?" And I listed what they were. And she said to me, "And what about that council chamber that you said was the key thing to changing the culture? Because that's not in your top 3. And that really was someone holding up a mirror and reminding me that's something that I might have really found difficult to do. But I left that room with a plan as to how I was going to do it and an absolute priority that come hell or high water, we were going to have a new council chamber. But I don't know that if I hadn't had that mirror right in front of me at that moment, that we would actually have gotten that culture change in DLR. So it does help you see how things really are. And that's a very practical example, but coaching really is about that kind of muscle memory, that when your back's to the wall and you just have things that are getting into your way. Like there are people who hate conflict and they'll go to all kinds of lengths to try and avoid it, even when actually going in and having the row might have been the right thing. And there's other people who love conflict and they create it even when it isn't there. And both of those things get in your way when you're trying to be the best performer that you can be. But I think sometimes we just don't see what it is that we're doing. And coaching is about heightening that awareness and actually saying to you, well, you know, do you think that the row might have been better? Do you think you needed to have the row, whatever that issue might be? And sometimes we do get in our own way. When I think back to the awful tragedy that happened in Carrickmines with the fire, and there was a moment when we had to move site, and we were all set to go into one place, and we weren't going to get in there. And so there was a moment when I had to change my mind. And if you're someone who has a problem changing your mind, then that's a very difficult space to be. But I would have been very clear. What matters here are the family. So it was a much easier decision than it might have been for someone else. But what I'm trying to say to you is that depending on what your natural tendency is, coaching can actually help you work back from that. And that slide about we know more than we can tell is very much about that there's always that hidden side to us where you don't actually know, why do I go out and have that row? Or why didn't I go out and have the row? What are the things that trigger? Coaching is not counselling, and it's really important to know the difference, but it can help you identify that the same things are happening over and over again. And it can help you deal with those uncomfortable topics. And, you know, they'll be different for everybody. And it's the bit about yourself that you're most uncomfortable with. I certainly would have had to get up every day and persuade myself that I was good enough. But at least I learned that, that I had to persuade and that I was persuadable. So it is the uncomfortable bit where you're actually saying, gosh, maybe I think I'm not good enough. But you really have to accept your own reality to do that. And coaching will only ever work for you if you're actually prepared to be vulnerable and really look at that. But it also lets you try out things, and it lets you test those behavioral changes and start to say, God, does that work better for me? And over time, it's really allowing you to be your own coach. So I think that when your awareness gets really heightened and you can actually think, okay, I'm getting that feeling of anxiety. So what's going on around me? What's triggering it? And that's the thing that I need to deal with. So coaching might only be short term, but it has a very big long-term benefit because it gives you those kind of skills and lets you shouldn't be with your coach for years. And you certainly should be able to take the things away from it and be really clear about where you're going with it. So we're going to look at the external and internal landscape. And Claire Walsh is a deep diver, and she wrote, I've been quite interested in how she took it up during COVID, but she wrote a book recently, and she talked about how snorkeling is about looking around and deep diving is about looking within. And so taking the snorkeler first and looking at the external landscape, they're the things that are on the surface and they're still very real. You know, the relationships that affect the way you do your work, your colleagues, the deadlines that come out of nowhere or the deadlines that you know are there, and the political environment. That somebody once said to me that the minority government was reflected in every council chamber around the country. And that's a very real external landscape. But they tend to be the things that are a little bit above the line that still have to be dealt with. And coaching does help you deal with those. But it's also about taking that deep dive, which is really about looking within. And I think the thing about looking within is that they are all of the things that actually really affect our own performance, whether that's about a memory, whether that's about values. And very often it's a clash of values that really is difficult for people. Now, I coach quite a lot of people who were working in the private sector and really hit the wall where they had been quite successful. They were earning the big bucks and life had become kind of meaningless. And it is that moment then of, I want a meaningful job, but am I prepared to sacrifice the lifestyle that this job has given me for something more meaningful where there's less income? And as a coach, it was my job to help them decide which sacrifice they wanted to make. So that is very much about that clash of values. Some people might decide, I want to stay. Some people decide, I want to go. Some people decided, I'm not ready to make that decision yet. And the other thing about coaching is that, you might want to be changing behaviors, but those behaviors were methods of self-protection. And for many, many years, they probably served you well. And in reality, it's just that times have moved on. So I just want to look at an example of that external and internal piece. And, when you're coming in to do a presentation, God, there's always a ton of work involved in it. And at first glance, it seems like it's about this presentation. And anyone can get through one presentation. It's a bit like walking the Camino. You need to do it every day, not just one day. And the thing about the external versus the internal is that on the one hand, what you're saying or what people see is, I want to be ready for that big presentation next week. But internally, it's about, God, I want to have the confidence and I want to be ready for any of the questions. The reality in both instances, so in the external world, it's I don't have an awful lot of time. I don't really know what the audience wants, but the subject matter is easy, so maybe I can just knock something out. But your real internal reality is that you're really nervous about it. You're starting to lose sleep about it. You're getting worried. And maybe the ultimate bit is that there's an old critical boss there and you start to become afraid that their aim will be to show me up. Now, whether that's true or not doesn't stop you having the thought. And in coaching, then you're looking at what the options are. And coaching kind of helps you get to, well, which reality matters. But there's also being clear about, you figure out your pathway. On the external bit, it's you just do the few slides, you run through it with somebody, you get yourself all ready. The internal piece where a coach can really help is, well, why are you worried? And why would you be nervous? And why do you care what that old boss thinks anyway? Sure, they're an old boss. And also about trying to, well, what are the ways you're going to deal with that anxiety? And how might you reach out to others for support? And while that might be coaching about one presentation, it actually is coaching about a skill that'll last you forever, because it will do for the next presentation. But either way, it does help you figure out what the plan is. The internal, dealing with the internal lasts a lifetime. Dealing with the external will certainly get you through the practicalities of doing a presentation. So just finishing up then, I suppose the thing about being a coachee is that when you get to the nub of the issue, and the thing that really holds you back, it undoubtedly is the thing that causes a physical sensation in your body when you talk about it. So whether you know it or not as a coachee, the hot issue will always be the one about which you have the strongest feelings. So it'll resonate with you almost straight away. There'll be that moment when someone asks that question and you start to think, I can actually feel my reaction to that. Think about being in your council chamber and a particular councillor stands up and they don't even have to open their mouth, but you might have the physical sensation. So it is always the one that you'll feel that about. So coaching is about, it's really about noticing the things that are holding you back. And it is for you if you want to remove what those obstacles are. Those obstacles might for now be very comfortable and you might want to have them there. But ultimately, if you want to actually move those obstacles out of your way, the things that are holding you back, then coaching might really be a way that does that. And it does it best when there's a little bit of distance and it's a really safe place. So it is a coach that you trust. And not every coach suits every person. So it's important you find the one that works for you, but also that you get to a point where you are prepared to be vulnerable, and you'll only get what you give. So if you are someone who says, I've got to convince myself I'm good enough every day, then you're more likely to get more out of it than someone who's saying, look, it's just about this presentation. If I could just get through that, that would be different. So it's how liberated you might want to feel. And in terms of working with a coach, you're probably talking about not more than 6 months. And if it goes on longer than that, it's probably not serving you quite as well as it might. So that's really all I have. If you have questions on it, we'll deal with them at the end. So I'm going to hand over to Lucy, and I'm actually going to change places with her because I'm reliably informed that this seat works. So we'll do that. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Philomena, and hello to all of you. I'm just delighted to be here and delighted to be invited to speak to you, because I think you'll see from Philomena's presentation, like Philomena, I'm really passionate about coaching and about team and executive and individual coaching. But the beauty of my presentation now is that pretty much everything that Philomena said applies in the broader context of team coaching as well. That's the reality of it, because all of what you said about the internal, the external, the performance of the teams, what's holding them back, the lack of honest discussions, the lack of courageous conversations, all of that applies to teams as well. So that's the beauty of it, because I think much of the content of what you have to say about team coaching is actually as relevant to team coaching as it is to executive coaching. Obviously, we're talking about individuals and teams, but a lot of that, of those principles are pretty much the same. So I'm going to start with to cheer us all up and to bring a smile to our faces. It's lovely to see the happiness and the joy on that particular team. I think we all enjoyed the great win against England and Grand Slam. But I suppose I'm putting it up there because we know them as a team. But a lot of team coaching and a lot of the evidence about high performing teams and effective teams would tell us that really effective teams, it's not the actual performance on the day as much as the planning and the preparation and the construction and the structure of the team and all of the background work that goes into creating a great team. So as you know, whatever the performance on the day, an awful lot went behind that. So what is a team? We'll just go on to that. So just the green elements here, these are just some of the key elements of a team as opposed to a group or anything else. A team is a small number of people. Think about this in your jobs. Usually, if it's more than 8 or 9 people, it's not really a team. It might be a group, it might be a committee, it might be a task force, whatever. But a team is a small group of people with complementary skills, and importantly, they're committed to a common purpose, performance goals and approach, and they hold themselves mutually accountable. So there's a lot of things, even in a very small definition there by Katzenbach and Smith. Small number, complementary skills, a common purpose, common performance goals and approach, but holding themselves accountable. And we'll go into more of that shortly. So what are the questions that would define a team? And I know that in your own work and you're part of teams, you set up teams. There are lots of teams in organizations, teams. So what can we do together that we cannot do just as well apart? So that's a good way to think about the team that you're on or the team that you're leading. You know, what can we do together that we can't do separately? What do we need or what do we want to achieve that requires us to be more than the sum of our parts? And we all know that about sporting teams. We all know, you know, we've heard it so many times that on the football pitch or on any team, that the team performed as a team. They didn't perform as a group of individuals. So how often in our own work do we see teams and we know that when we leave the room, each person is going to take their own bit and they're going to work on it, but they're not really thinking of the team. And this is part of the rationale for coaching. And what is the nature of the interdependency? Okay, so you might ask yourself, what's the difference between a team and a group? Well, the first thing to say that a real team has to have the right people on it, but it has to have certain structures. In other words, it has to be what we call bounded, and it has to be stable, which means that people just can't come and go on a team, or the team can't change the membership the next day, or somebody might just walk in and be a substitute for somebody else on a team. And you know that that happens an awful lot in the public service. You know, teams or committees are set up, and next minute you find that the key person isn't there and that sends somebody else. That's one of the really distinctive factors about a team. It's bounded, it's stable, it's a real team. It has the right people on board, it has the right structures underpinning it, and so on. So this is just some research again from Katzenbach and Smith, but they kind of define the difference between a working group, which can be quite, you know, quite effective, a pseudo team, a potential team, a real team, and a high-performing team. And in this short presentation, I'm going to take you through some of the science of how to get to being a high-performing team. But sometimes I look at this and I say, I'm from Galway, and they played Mayo last weekend, and I'm saying, where are Galway now? Well, I think they're somewhere between a potential team and a real team. What do you think? I think Mayo are a real team, and they're going to a high performance team, because I did notice a lot in watching Galway that a lot of changes, different personnel that I hadn't had before coming in and going out. They're still a potential team. They haven't really settled as a team. And I know I'm using a lot of football analogies and so on, but they are good. They're good constructs to consider when you're considering a team. So one of the things you might consider when you leave this meeting and on your way home or whatever, what kind of teams are you involved in, and where would you pitch them here? Where would you put them? Are they real teams? Are they working groups? Are they pseudo teams? And have you ever been, or are you on, a high performing team? So then what is team coaching? So I'll go to the second next. Yeah, just go to the next one again, I'd say. Actually, yeah. So I think the first thing that I always consider when I think of team coaching is the team must deliver for the organization. You know, teams are teams and they can, do lots of things. But coaching, very much around what Philomena was saying, is about empowering the team to deliver for their organization, their stakeholders and their customers. And a high-performing team has a very deep understanding of its role and its purpose in meeting the strategic goals of the business. So sometimes, teams up and down the organization, they may not be clear about what their purpose and their role is, but often they're not clear about how their contribution is to the organization. And that's particularly true of very complex organizations, like we'll say the council groups and the city councils and so on. What's their contribution to the overall strategic aims of the organization? So when we coach and when we have team coaching, our approach is to help the team, to motivate the team to dig deeper, to understand their own context, their purpose, and the challenge not just faced by the team, but by the organization. And again, not unlike individual coaching, uncover the hidden barriers to achieve their goals, to deepen their awareness and unleash their full potential as a team, and ultimately to deliver the strategic goals of the company and the organization. So there's a lot there, and I'll go in a little bit more deeply to it now in the next slide. So what's the difference between coaching then and something like facilitation or team building? And I learned this actually, Philomena, when I was in the team coaching diploma. And I remember I was coaching an SME senior management team. And they were a group, I suppose, it's a very traditional organization. And the management team was comprised mainly of men and just one woman. But I went through a lot with them in the sessions that we had with them, and it was quite successful. They wanted to develop a new strategic plan. They wanted to put together an innovation pipeline. They wanted to build more professional HR systems and so on. And we went through all of that. And I would call that all of the external, as you talked about it. But I realized after doing 3 sessions with this team that I was facilitating. I wasn't coaching, because there was an elephant in the room that I wasn't addressing. They were all acting as individuals. They were scoring off each other. The head of innovation, all he wanted was innovation. The head of the production and manufacturing, all wanted to do was everything to. So I didn't really, coaching is the difference. The difference between coaching and facilitation is that you hold a very safe space for the team to dig deep and to learn and to grow. You enable the team to encounter something that's absolutely new and help them to absorb it. It helps them to understand the strategic context and their role in this and valuing the external and the wider perspective as well as the internal. But mostly it involves deep listening. If I had been listening at those sessions and if I'd been really present, I would have been able to pick up those deep-seated behaviors and challenge them on them that I didn't seem to do because I was working through an agenda and I was working through the facilitation. So for example, that team once said, I think we're stuck. And I suppose I went around then saying, well, how can we, not be, but I should have stopped right there and said, okay, what does that feel like? I should have gone really, really into that because there was something stuck about the team. And in coaching, you get really down deep and you address that, you get to the bottom of it. You don't just try and address or solve it straight away. So powerful questioning, creating awareness. So it's getting really, really deep and uncovering those very deep-seated feelings and behaviors that all teams have. And using a range of skills, of course, from executive coaching, like all of those powerful questions, listening, being absolutely present, holding that safe space. We've said that at the beginning, that's very important. It has to be a safe place because the team won't engage and they won't feel comfortable about talking about their own vulnerabilities or talking about really important issues for the team unless you have a very safe space and psychological safety in the interactions. So integrating our past experience and skills with team coaching to enable the team achieve real change, growth, and ultimately transformation. So in facilitation or in some other kind of approach, intervention with teams, you might reach a place where you have a new plan, you have all sorts of processes in place, and there might be a lot of progress. But in coaching, you really get underneath the real issues and you really uncover whatever is going on in the team that's holding it back, the same as in executive coaching. So just moving on then to, I mentioned to you earlier that I talked to you about the science of great teams. And there's a couple of things. The most important things, I suppose, are the conditions under which the team is set up. So if you are setting up a new team to deliver a new program or to respond to one of the other big challenges that are coming your way these days, just take a lot of time in setting up the team properly, because that's really up to 80%, some researchers say, of the success of a team. Then there's the team processes and then the effectiveness of the team. And we're going to show you those now in a little bit more depth in the next slide, which is a bit complicated, but you'll be getting the slides. And the reason I want to show it to you is that this is a really, really powerful, I suppose, summary of all the elements of a team, but it's also a very powerful diagnostic tool. So let's imagine that you were to bring in a team coach to work with your team or one of the teams that you have responsibility for. One of the first things that a coach will do is to do some sort of diagnostic assessment. There's a survey around this, and people can be interviewed and so on. And what this does then, it kind of shows up what the issues in the team are. So there are scores for all of these. So look at the left-hand side of that screen and look at the green triangle, and that's where the heart of it is. That's the 6 conditions start over there, the green triangle and the yellow triangle, but the green one first. The 6 conditions for team effectiveness. First of all, is it a real team? Are there 20 people on the team? Are people coming and going? Are there the right skills or the right people on the team? So on. So is it a real team, first of all? Are the right people on the team? And has the team got what we call a compelling purpose? So they're the first 3 conditions that are absolutely critical for the success of any team. And they are more important, believe it or not, than ultimately whether there's conflict or whether there's a bad dynamic in the team, whatever. Setting up the team is really important. So as I said, it's a real team. It is bounded, if it's stable, and it has the right structures in place. But the right people, you know, have you the right set of skills? Sometimes, you know, and I look back on my career in the civil service, and, you know, there'd be teams set up all over the place and committees and so on. And you'd only be there because of your role. Didn't mean whether that you could do the job or you had the right skills for that team and so on, because you're representing a group or whatever. So the real team has right people and a compelling purpose. And then the enablers, they're the essentials, as they call it, that it has a sound structure. In other words, it's not too big or too small. It has a proper setup. And it has a supportive context from the organization. And it mentions team coaching, but they don't really mean that you have somebody coming in, but that you have somebody keeping an eye to how the team is progressing, whether it's the CEO or the senior leader or whoever, that somebody is watching how the team is performing and how the team is gelling and how the structures are in place. And then moving to the next slide, the key task processes, the performance then will depend on the level of effort, the strategy for the team, and of course the knowledge and skills. And the final one, the navy one at the right-hand side, is the outcome. In other words, the quality of the group process, how they performed the task, did they deliver from their stakeholder, and importantly, the satisfaction of the team. So now I know that's quite complicated, but I'm showing you that because it's one of the first things that somebody would do if they were going to go in, because obviously as a coach, you won't know who the team is. But when you do a little bit of that analysis, you can actually find out, well, hang on a second, you know, this team is not getting any support from the organization. So how can it perform? Or this team doesn't have the right people on it. Or this team is not clear about its purpose. So you can get to the bottom of all of that. And before I just go on to the next slide, and we're nearly there now, just for a moment before I go on to, just consider if you could write down even where you are, what do you think are the 5 dysfunctions of a team? How would you put, and I might ask you that later on, what would you say are the 5 common misfunctions of a team? There's a whole series of research and industry around the 5 dysfunctions of a team by a man called Lencioni. Okay, so we'll go on to the next one. Yeah, so now look to the left of this slide and go to the bottom. The first common dysfunction of a team is lack of trust. And lack of trust often happens because of a lack of ability to be vulnerable. You get trust when people show their vulnerability. So people on a team are putting on a face, they're performing, they're not showing their vulnerability, and ultimately you're not getting a real team or you're not getting real trust. The second one, of course, we're all very familiar with it, conflict. Artificial harmony, not discussing the real issues, avoiding conflicts, not speaking up, listening, all of that. The next one is commitment. You know, the people aren't committed to producing for the team. And of course, that shows up very, very quickly when there's something very serious at stake, when something has to be delivered quickly, or, you know, when there's a performance required. Now, the next one is interesting because I've done this with a number of teams in the public service. And it's the yellow one there, it's the accountability that's most missing in a lot of teams. We don't hold each other to account. We're kind of too nice to each other. So are you on a senior management team where everybody says the right thing, but they don't say, well, look, I was waiting for you to deliver that and I couldn't do my job until, you know, in a nice, non-threatening way. And then the concentration and the attention to results is the top one. So it's trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. If you have those in spades, as you do on the right-hand side, you will probably have a good team as well. So it's another model. As I said, there are different models in terms of the science of good teams. And I'm putting them there for you because you can use them later. So to finish up then, I'm just going to talk about what I call courageous conversations. And courageous conversations are really at the heart of what team coaching, and indeed even executive coaching, is about. And what are they? They are the conversations that we don't want to have. They address the elephant in the room, or as somebody said to me recently, the herd of elephants in the room. And this is the beauty of team coaching. It enables teams to have those difficult, honest, and courageous conversations in a safe environment, you know, where everybody feels comfortable, everybody feels safe, and people don't feel threatened. So thank you very much. We'll take questions now.
I'll go to the last one, Liam. And again.
That's perfect. So, God, thanks very much. That was absolutely fantastic. What I'm just going to do is I'm going to turn off the recording now at this stage, if that's okay, so that people feel that they have some freedom to ask questions. One second, I just want to make sure I capture this before I stop recording.